Yeah, me and my friends were in this Jewish parody rap group that, if you think about like what Weird Al does,
Yeah.
it's basically like that. Mind-blowing. It's like, you took a 50 Cent song and you put it over this house song? Are you insane? You know, Hollerboard was run by Hollertronics out of Philly. Hollertronics was Diplo and a DJ named Low Budget. And they were a DJ duo for many, many years. That's how Diplo got his start. And they ran this message board that was kind of a hub for all of us in that scene at the time.
Hi, this is Lauren Engel of Sidewalk Talk. I'm here with Willy Joy.
What up?
Shout out to our chat people for connecting us. I just had to put it out
shout
there.
out to Reddit real quick. We see you guys.
Yeah. So you were born in Minneapolis?
I was born in Minneapolis. Yeah, I lived there till I was 18.
Yeah.
Midwest boy, born and raised.
Were your parents born there as well?
No, my mom was born in Ohio, and my dad is from Alaska, actually.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so his whole side of the family. We still got some family over there. And then, yeah, my mom's also Midwest.
What made him move to like Minneapolis? Or
God,
Midwest?
that's a great question. It was for work and for school. I mean, he went to university in Ohio, which is where he met my mom.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it was for school originally, and I think probably my dad's a real quiet guy, so getting the full story is sometimes hard, and then my memory is bad, so it gets even worse. But I think probably there was an aspect of just wanting to escape. You know, he was in a small town in Alaska, and probably just wanted to see a little more of the world.
So what do they do? Are they in the musical field at all?
No, not at all. My mom is a doctor. She's a rheumatologist working with joints. And my dad is a computer engineer, software engineer, retired now. They're both mostly retired, but for all of his life, he was a software guy.
Did you have some kind of pressure with them being more in like the academic sense?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I come from a very sort of traditional middle class background, very average. Like if you just think about like white Midwestern middle class, like whatever image, that you're exactly right. Like that's exactly what it was. And you know, I went to a nice private school for high school. It was always expected I would go to a good college and get a good job, kind of that standard track.
And how do you describe yourself back then growing up?
I was a slow, what do you call it, late bloomer, like slow to develop. Nice kid. I was quiet. I was super nerdy. I read a lot of books, listened to a lot of music. Music was very important to me from an early age.
Who were your favorite authors back then?
Man, I'm a nerd, so it's mostly like sci-fi and fantasy stuff. Early on, like some of the classics like Neil Gaiman and William Gibson. These are like sci-fi writers who probably only nerds know, but they were big for me. A couple classics. My mom gave me some George Orwell really early on, and that stuck. But yeah, just fantasy and sci-fi stuff. You know, all the like Lord of the Rings, all that shit, but then way deeper too.
What kind of music were they playing in the house?
My family wasn't hugely musical. It wasn't like we always had music playing. It was kind of something I came to on my own. I mean, my mom loves folk music, and so like Willie Nelson and Joan Baez and all that. But it wasn't like she was really playing much of it in the house. And yeah, not much for my dad either. So it was really something I came to on my own. I mean, for me, Michael Jackson was like one of the first. When I was a kid, I was obsessed. I wanted to dance like him, sung all the songs. That was like the first time as a small child I can remember really being like, holy shit, there's something here.
And then you were also playing the trumpet, right? Or
I played jazz trumpet. Oh, hey, we got some chickens. What's up, chickens? They put me in jazz band pretty early, and I was playing trumpet for all of my childhood, probably a decade or so.
Oh wow.
Yeah, I loved it.
So you're in a bunch of orchestras?
Yeah, mostly jazz bands. I did a little bit of like youth symphony stuff. And yeah, I got pretty good. I did that. I took drum lessons for like half a year, guitar lessons
you were in
for
some
a
metal
year.
bands, right?
I was, yeah. That was metal was like my first real active like teenage rebellion or whatever, where I don't know why, I still don't to this day. I still love metal, but it just grabbed me. Like that's something I felt really strongly about. It was like a community, you know. I was like, yeah, I'm a metalhead, which was cool because you all, especially when you're that age, you want to identify with a group or something like that. So that was that for me. And yeah, I was in metal bands. I sung mostly in metal bands. Played the guitar very badly. None of the bands were good. It was definitely not professional in any way.
Were you in some like Jewish party hip hop crew?
Yeah, you did your research. Yeah, I was like a lot of white boys at a certain age. I wanted to rap, and the way I came to it was, me and my friends were in this Jewish parody rap group. If you think about like what Weird Al does, it's basically like that. Like we would take popular songs and parody them, except ours were all about being Jewish and also like really, really filthy.
Is this stuff online?
Man, I mean, if some detective out there wants to dig it up.
I feel like the R-Shop people are going to dig so deep right now.
Yeah. Some of it still is, although, like, I'm still the outcast of the group. Like, the other guys went on, they're like lawyers and doctors, so they don't want it found at all. So I think some scrubbing has been done, but it's some of it's still out there. Yeah.
What were your favorite subjects back in high school?
You know, I was a good student. I did pretty well in school. That was kind of the weird thing. I did really well, but it wasn't particularly enjoyable for me. So I don't know, I guess the humanities, I mean, English and theater for sure. Like I did a lot of theater in high school. I actually taught theater for a couple summers to little kids. And so yeah, definitely humanities on the art side of it. Like math I was good at, but I never liked. And then at a certain point I kind of dropped all of the harder science stuff.
Why did you decide to go to Brown for music?
I didn't know I was going to go for music at the time. I just applied to a lot of good schools because that's what I was supposed to do, you know? And I was kind of just following the track I thought I was supposed to follow without thinking about it too much. And then I got there, and Brown is the kind of school where there's not a lot of requirements. It's pretty self-directed.
Oh, yeah.
And so I got there and I was like, oh, wait, I have to figure out what I actually want to do, which was the first time in my life, really, that I had just been able, with no one else telling me, to try to figure out what I wanted to do. And so how I did it was basically I figured out all the stuff I didn't want to do, which is what I was saying, you know, some of the hard science stuff. And yeah, I took a lot of like music courses. I took a lot of theater courses in that first year and a half. And I don't know, music my whole life has been the only thing that really like hit something deep for me. Like I know a lot of people who are really passionate about a lot of different things, and you know, they could maybe go and do this, or they could be an architect, or they could be a fashion designer because they like all these different things. That was never me. It's always been music for me. And so I did music there, which was kind of it's funny because I mean I have a degree in music from a really good college, but it has nothing to do with the music that I do now, and really nothing I learned there helped me.
Was it mostly just for your parents then? Do you think you would have gone just straight into music?
Probably, yeah, but this goes back to what I was saying about being a late bloomer. It's like I really just wasn't there yet. Like I wasn't self-directed, so I didn't feel like I had to go to college because of my parents. I just did it because that's what I was supposed to do, and I really wasn't thinking that hard about sort of taking my life in my own hands and and doing, figuring out what it is that I really wanted to do.
Yeah.
So yeah, I was just following the track. It wasn't until maybe halfway through college that I sort of realized that, time is ticking, and if I, once I'm out of college, then I'm really fucked if I don't have anything to do. So.
What did your parents think of you studying music?
They were supportive of me studying music for sure, but I'm guarantee they didn't expect or want me to go in this direction with it. I'm sure they thought if I was doing music that I would end up in some kind of more academic or more formal, in an orchestra or something like that. Yeah, they were definitely nervous. My parents are great. They never told me, don't do this. Never told me you're fucking up, which I'm sure it looked like I was for a long time. They're very supportive, but they were definitely nervous. I mean, we've had the conversation since where they were like, yeah, I didn't really know what you were doing back then. They probably still don't know what I'm doing, but they're lovely people. Yeah.
And then you were starting to DJ at that time during college.
I actually started DJing in high school.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I was... me and some friends, so I went through this metal phase, and kind of at the same time, I started getting into raving. So I was sort of this like hybrid metalhead raver kid, and we got really obsessed with going to raves and seeing DJs in like junior year of high school. And a friend of mine bought turntables. This is back in the day when, there's no DJing with electronics. I mean, you would buy vinyl records and put it on the physical turntable. And so we would go over to his house after school every day, mess around on the turntables. And eventually I was over there like every day after school. I was using them way more than he was. His family was really sick of me.
Oh, wow.
And so I ended up buying the turntables from him over a period of time and moved them into my room. And yeah, I mean, in high school, it was just like playing a couple local raves and mostly, house parties, or I DJ'd a school dance once. Yeah, it was like just little kid stuff. And then college was when I, started to...
Were you kind of known in Brown then for being like a DJ?
Yeah, for sure. There were only a few kind of DJs who played all the local, like the frat parties and the school events and that sort of thing. There was a pool of probably like 4 or 5 of us. We all just sort of rotated. Actually, in my grade at Brown, in the music program, Sammy Bananas was also in there, who's released a bunch of records with Fool's Gold and produced for a lot of artists who are kind of popping in our scene now.
But that time you were DJing more top 40, right?
Yeah, yes and no. I had some top 40 gigs that were kind of paying for my groceries at the time. And so, it was that, but it was sort of a different era too, where it was a little less defined, because you could go to a spot, and this is college too, so everyone kind of just wanted to party. And so you would go to a spot and you would for sure play the hits, play whatever was popping on the radio, but you could also completely get away with playing some crazy, house song that no one's ever heard and just mixing it in there. This was the era of like, we call it the party jams era, kind of the mashup era, where back then, the idea of a mashup was even something crazy. Like that was a new thing,
I remember it sounded so cool. I was like, oh my god, all these songs in one?
Right, yeah, mind-blowing. It's like, you took a 50 Cent song and you put it over this house song? Are you insane? And now that's like every day, 10 songs like that come out. But yeah, so I guess all I'm saying really is that there were less rules about it. So I was playing more top 40 stuff, but it wasn't really defined like that. Like I could kind of play whatever.
Yeah.
And that's what all of us were doing.
What happened after college?
So after college, I got a job in Boston. It's the only like real job, quote unquote, I've ever had as an adult. Making ringtones for cell phones. Back when that was a job that people had. And
was it so what was the company?
Not a company you ever would have heard of. Basically, it was just a tech company. It was called Groove Mobile, just some tech company name. And we were sort of the middlemen between record labels and cell phone carriers. So the record labels would send us their catalogs. We would make ringtones out of their catalogs and then serve it up to the cell phone carriers.
Yeah.
And I did that for 2 years, making ringtones, and it's all right.
Yeah.
Nothing special.
Did you actually have anyone who, like, you're walking outside and you hear a ringtone that you made?
Yeah, I mean, back then, for sure.
Wow,
for sure.
That's
yeah.
kind of cool.
Yeah, it was cool. It was a fun little gig. I wasn't passionate about it, but paid pretty good, and it was vaguely related to music. My parents were happy. You know, it seemed like a good step. And then, you know, to speed things up, basically how I got into doing music full time was there was one year I was out at South by Southwest in Austin, Texas, and throughout this whole time I was still DJing, right?
Wait, what year was this?
That would be 2006.
Okay.
So I'm out at South by Southwest, Austin, Texas. The company paid for the trip because we had some work meetings out there, but really I was kind of scamming on them and playing a bunch of shows and like just tried to be a
I
DJ.
love that.
Yeah. On their dime. And probably it was karma. The company got acquired by a bigger company, as does happen.
Yeah.
And I was laid off in that acquisition. And I found out, I got a phone call in the Austin airport on the way back home that I no longer had a job. It was like literally like 5 minutes before I got on the plane. And then, you know, they were just like, yeah, you know, your whole life is different now. And then I just had to go and like turn my phone off and sit on the plane and try to process that.
Wow.
And yeah, it was a weird time. I tried to find another job and I couldn't. I looked really hard for a long time and yeah, no one would hire me. So I kind of just out of necessity to pay my rent, pay my bills, had to kick up the DJ hustle. And so I just, you know, scraped around looking for more gigs.
Was this still in Boston?
So shortly after that, it's kind of both. A little after that, I moved to Chicago, which was the foundation of my whole career. And so between Boston and Chicago, I made a bunch of connections, scrounged up a bunch of gigs, and then after maybe a year or so of doing that, I was like, well, you know what, I'm surviving. Maybe I don't need to find a real job. Maybe this can be a real job. And that's how it started, and it's just grown from there.
Actually, your name itself, I know it's short for William, but why do you choose Willy?
It's you got to thank my parents for that one. I've just been Willy since I was a kid.
Oh, everyone calls you Willy?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's not a stage name or anything. It's just it's easier for me. I don't have to remember two names.
And then so from Chicago, how were you even like meeting people initially?
MySpace. MySpace was a big one. Well, two things. MySpace, and there was a forum, a bulletin board online called the Holler Board. And the Holler Board was run by Hollertronics out of Philly. Hollertronics was Diplo and a DJ named Low Budget. And they were a DJ duo for many, many years. That's how Diplo got his start. And they ran this message board that was kind of a hub for all of us in that scene at the time. It was a much smaller scene. It was maybe, 100 people on this message board. But those 100 people, almost all of them have gone on to be names that kind of everyone watching this would know. So it was kind of a cool little small community that ended up growing into something much larger. So I met people there, and then when I moved to Chicago, I sort of just researched, well, what's popping in Chicago? Who's really doing something interesting? And I just started hitting them up on MySpace. So I definitely hollered at the Flosstradamus guys on MySpace. That's the first time I ever talked to them.
Oh, wow.
The cool kids, for sure. Just there was a Chicago crew back then. There was like a posse that everyone was working together, making music together, and I wanted in. And I kind of just told them, I was like, I'm joining your friend group now.
Yeah.
And I was lucky, it worked.
Yeah. Actually, how did you go from listening to metal to the DJ, and then now like the more trap heavy? So how did you veer towards like the trap?
For me, music is really more of a vibe and a feeling that I get when I hear it. It sounds stupid, but genre means less to me than I think it means to a lot of people. Like the same reason I like metal, it's kind of the same reason I like the dance music that I like, and it's kind of the same reason I like the rap that I like. It's just something that when I hear it, it touches some part of my brain, some chemical gets released, and it just makes me feel like a strong emotion, a strong vibe, something that gives you goosebumps. And for whatever reason, it's different sounds can all have that same effect on me. And that's when I produce music, when I DJ, when I listen just for pleasure, that's all I'm trying to get out of it. That's all I'm looking for always, is just getting back to that vibe of those first few songs that you heard that, just raise the hair on the back of your neck.
Yeah. What were the first people that you found that like veered you towards that scene?
The dance scene?
Yeah, like other than your friends.
Well, it was a lot of the Midwest guys. So, I mean, like I said, I started raving when I was 16, 17 in Minnesota. And we would go out to these raves, and they would have headliners from the UK a lot of the time, or they would have one big headliner from Europe and then a lot of local Midwest guys. So it was sort of a combination of those two things. From the UK, it was a lot of guys doing break beats and a lot of old UK hardcore and happy hardcore and, sort of like the really extreme, crazy sounds. And maybe that's the connection back to metal, too, is I always went for the, like, kind of extremes. I never really was the, sort of classy house guy. I love that music, too, but it just was never what drew me in.
Yeah.
And so maybe that was it. And it was guys from the UK, it was guys from Europe. Trance was big back then, like the BTs and the Paul Van Dykes and all that. So that was my entry point. Mm-hmm. But it wasn't really until I found that community, like I was saying, the Hollerboard, and meeting guys like Diplo and Floss and Sammy Bananas and all those guys, they were like regional scenes in every part of the country, and we were all working with the same ideals in different places and building these cool little local communities. It was really when I felt like I was part of that community that I started to get really passionate about it.
What would you say was your first big moment that you were able to get her name out there? Was it the Kid Sister, or did you have something before that?
I mean, I had been DJing and releasing records before I started DJing for Kid Sister, but I wouldn't even say that she took my name to another level, but she opened up my world. So I DJ'd for her for a couple years when her career was really popping off. She was doing really well. And for your viewers who may not know, I mean, she was 2006 to 2008, maybe even up to 2010, very popular rapper, singer, extremely talented. She's still extremely talented and still making music. But that was the time when I intersected with her, and she took me around the world. We toured extensively, which I hadn't done before. And it just opened up my... It was the first time I was a professional on that level, I'll put it that way.
How did you get that opportunity? Did you already have a team back then?
I did have a booking agent, but the way I got that opportunity was through Nick Catchdubs, who is one of the co-creators of Fool's Gold Records. He and I had been friends from the Hollerboard days and had known each other, and we'd played each other's parties. He was in New York, I was in Chicago. We'd sleep on each other's couches. Good friend. Fool's Gold put out one of my records, just a lot of connections. And she needed a new DJ. He knew that I had been DJing locally for some rappers in Chicago, and he just called me up one day, and it kind of dropped into my lap at a very good time in my life and changed my whole world, man. Through that gig, I met so many more people. I learned so much about how to be a professional on the road, traveling, how to maintain sanity through all of that, and just to watch the way that the Kid Sister machine worked. Because she was, at a certain point, I don't think it's hyperbole to say she was a budding pop star. And so to see how that huge machine operates around one person and the pressures that it brings in and the way, all the people you meet and the way you deal with all these people, And she had a big team, so I could watch how her team worked and figure out, okay, a business manager does this and a tour manager does that. And yeah, it was eye-opening years.
Yeah.
And so much fun too. I mean, some of those shows we played, she was very good to me. I would usually play a set of my own somewhere in the show. And then at the end of the show, she'd make me do a dance, which was not my favorite part.
Oh my gosh.
But no, it was great. Those years were life-defining for sure.
What happened after that?
After that, basically since then, it's just been this slow building of my career up to this point. I started releasing a lot more records.
Yeah.
I started working with a lot more people in the scene, collaborating a lot more, really started taking production a lot more seriously. I'd been doing it, I'd been releasing records, and again, Reddit detectives, you can find the old ones, they're not good. They're not good. I wish they were not on the internet. But, over the years, I got better and better. And that's really all it's been. I started touring on my own, started getting bookings for solo shows. And it just kind of kept building. I'm not one of those artists that had that moment where all of a sudden you're rocketed to another level. It's been a slow burn career the whole way through. Yeah. Which is, not a good or a bad thing. It's just how it worked out for me. But it's just been kind of brick after brick, foot in front of the other kind of thing.
Actually, did it ever occur to you to start a record label because your friends were like Fool's Gold, Mad Juice, and all this stuff?
It's funny. So now I run my own podcast as well, which we were talking about before we hit record, and somebody was just asking me that. And here's the thing about this is that there was a certain point where everyone thought I should start a record label because I ended up in this position where I had a lot of young producers sending me music, and I was supplying a lot of music to some pretty big name DJs, just because the way.
What year was this?
A few years back.
Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't just one time, it was over a period of time. And the way it works a lot of times is, if you're friends with a bunch of DJs and a few of them get pretty famous or start doing big business, they'll still talk to the same people they were talking to before. And so some of my friends who had gotten really successful would still hit me up and say, hey, I'm playing this big show. Can you send me some cool new music? And I just got in that position where I was doing that a lot. I kind of was known for knowing good music, which is when you should probably start a record label. But for me, that's not the fun part. For me, running a record label seems like a lot of work, and it doesn't seem like something I think I'd be particularly good at. Like, what I love is the music itself. Like, I live to play shows and be on stage and do a set. Like, anywhere, anytime, that's when I am the happiest. Yeah. And so for me, it was just like, well, record labels, there's enough fucking record labels. We don't need any more record. Everybody has a record label. Yeah. Like, mine is not going to add something that wasn't there before. And record labels, I mean, you don't make money usually. Even the really big ones have trouble making money. And I don't know. I just didn't. Maybe it's just my ego. Like, maybe I was like, no, it's about me as an artist. It could have been any of those, but it just never was something I wanted to do.
And then in 2015, you kind of like doubled down on your production, really focused on that. Like, what was the turning point for that?
It's kind of, if you want to have a long-lasting career in this business, you have to look out a few years in advance. You have to try as much as you can to anticipate the trends or anticipate the death of trends, And for me, that's what it was. I was seeing more and more that the focus isn't so much about just can you DJ a really good show. It's more and more, what can you make? What do you have to show? How can you present a show that's original and unique? And the way most people were doing it, and still are, is production. And, really putting forth, not only am I playing these songs for you, but I made these songs for you. And this whole show is kind of just an extension of my personality. And it wasn't always like that. And so, I started seeing that happening. I realized that also, I mean, motherfuckers were just getting good, like really good. And for a while, my production was like I was in the middle of the pack. I was fine. And then at a certain point, technology and the speed that people could learn new technology got crazy.
Yeah.
And I was falling behind. So I was like, okay, I need to take a step back here, not just sort of keep the ball rolling, but, take 6 months off and really learn some new things. It'd been a while since I'd learned something new. It's easy when you have a career that involves this cycle of put out a song, go on tour, rinse, repeat. It's kind of, and again, that goes back to what I was saying about trying to anticipate those trends. And yeah, at a certain point, I was like, if I don't change something up in a year or two from now, I probably won't have a job,
Actually, why do you, so Back to Back started in 2000, like just last year, right?
Oh, the podcast, yeah. Back to Back started in March of 2017. We put out our first episode with Diplo, and it's been a weekly show ever since then. Yeah. And before we put that out, I had been conceptualizing it and setting it up and building the infrastructure for it for about 6 months before we started it.
Actually, why didn't it occur to you to start it earlier? Now I'm really wishing I started mine like 5 years ago.
I know, right? We'd both be millionaires. I did actually have the idea to do it earlier, but I was busy with other stuff, and it's a lot of work. I'm sure, as you know, it's a ton of work. It takes up so much time. And for me, I was like, well, how could I fit in creating a whole show in my career that I already have? And I kind of, at a certain point, just had to take a step back and say, I think this is a cool enough idea that, maybe I'll slow down my music releases for 2017. Maybe my touring will slow down a little bit while I build this show. And it's been great. I mean, I couldn't be happier that I took that step.
Yeah. Going into the podcast, what were your main goals for it?
Well, so I'm a podcast nerd in general, and I listen to a lot of podcasts, and I listen to people. I like to hear people talk about what they do. So I would listen to comedians' podcasts, or I would listen to actors or directors being interviewed, and usually people who I was a fan of already. And what I found out was that it's a new level of fandom when you hear somebody talk about not just their work, because I think we've all seen somebody interviewed about, your new record is called XYZ. What was your inspiration for writing it? That kind of like very surface level shit. But then when you hear somebody talk about their family and, what was going on in their life when they made a piece of art, or just, how they view their own art, these deeper questions, all of a sudden, I was almost more interested in that than I was in what they were actually making. Mm-hmm. And for me, so what the podcast is basically the same concept that you have, is it's these long-form conversations with artists, friends, peers, people I've worked with, people I've known for a long time, or people I've just met, and talking about their lives, their careers, the music industry, how did they get into it, what struggles have they faced? And it's been therapy for me, honestly. In a way, when I talk to them, I can think about my own life and my own music and my own career in a new light, and I get inspired, and I can go back and work on music with a new energy and with a new outlook. And so, in the end, I mean, I don't know, maybe I'm just selfish, but it comes back to me too. I love talking to these people, and the focus is on the guest. It's not on me, but I get a lot out of it too.
Yeah. Actually, how do you decide who to have on their show? Because over time, you just know heaps of people in music.
Yeah, so it started out, I was just talking to my friends, people I've known for a long time. I've known Diplo for probably over a decade, and he's a busy guy, but I hit him up and I was like, well, I'm starting this, and you're going to be the first guest, and I'm going to show up at your house. You tell me what day, and then we're going to do this thing. And he had no idea what it was, I'm sure. Yeah. And he was just like, all right, whatever. And that's how a lot of those early interviews and early podcasts came about. I did an early one with Kurt Flosstradamus, who I know you've had on the show too. Another long time friend of mine. Guys like Keys and Crates, a bunch of names. And then over time, it turned into more of an official show. Like I have a team behind it now. So wow. My manager who takes care of me as an artist has kind of turned into the producer of the show, in the sense that he helps me book artists now, and we can reach out to kind of a wider net. So, you know, more recently had guys on like Cascade or Seven Lions or that kind of thing, where I didn't really know them almost at all. And I think I've just been lucky. It's probably the same way your show's grown, in that, you know, once you get kind of a good resume, it's a lot easier to get people to sort of trust you and say, you know, yeah, this is a new idea and it probably sounds weird to you, but trust me, it's fun, and, you know, people really seem to like it.
Yeah. How do you think your music has changed from the early songs you made?
Well, just technically, I've become such a better producer than I was when I started. I didn't have any idea. I'm very self-taught. It's weird because I went to school for music and somehow managed to not learn anything about making music that I use now, other than, you know, some music theory. But yeah, making electronic music, my production is very self-taught. When I started, I was like a caveman. I was doing all the wrong stuff in the wrong way. And it worked, and you can make music any way you want. You know, some of the best producers that I love make it like a caveman. But yeah, I just got technically better, and I think I got better about realizing an artistic vision and really learning how to think of an idea before you sit down. You sit down. Over time, practice makes perfect, so you can arrange a song, you can lay it out faster and better, and you can understand how it'll work for a dance floor, how it'll work if another DJ plays it. That's just repetition. That's, you know, do it 1,000 times in a row, and eventually you'll get good at it. But in terms of artistic vision, yeah, I just figured out what I liked more, and it's really about the idea of having an idea in your head, and as quickly as you can, being able to sit down and get it in front of you before that kind of spark of creativity is gone. Because that can happen all the time. I'll think of an idea for a song. If I don't do anything with it, I sit down a couple hours later, that spark is kind of gone, and it's not going to work out. So it's really about the efficiency of it. I think that's what's gotten a lot better.
How do you think you've grown as a person since when you started?
I think I'm a lot more ready for the business side of everything now than I was when I started. Like I said, I'm slow to learn. I'm a late bloomer. So for me, it just took a while to sort of figure out exactly like we were saying. I went to school and I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I went to music, and for a while I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do with music. I just knew that I loved it. And so now I'm able to kind of make the songs that I want to make and have it cohesively hold together with my past work and what I'm going to do in the future. And I think I just matured. I grew up a little bit, you know, and all the people I came up with, we all kind of grew up together, you know, as people and as artists. And I think that the community aspect of it is maybe something I haven't really talked as much about in this interview, but that was a big part of it. Just like being part of that group and kind of everyone coming up, you know, some people getting really successful, some people failing and leaving the business entirely, but all of us going through the same struggles at the same time. I think it really helps to have not even a team, but just a group of people that you can kind of share an experience with and ask questions and see how they handle situations. Just watching people go through it, I think that helped me a lot.
Yeah. Last question, what do you want to be remembered for?
What do you want to be remembered for? Okay, so I have a thing about this. And this isn't an idea original to me. I can't take credit for it. But really, I don't believe in the idea of a legacy because sure, I would love to make some music that people love and remember for 100 years. But even if I do that, in 200 years, probably no one would even remember that. You know, in the long-term thing, most of us have no legacy. It just doesn't exist. For anyone, really. You know, unless you're Mozart or Beethoven. You know, like there were a couple of them, and they were 300 years ago. And so I don't even think about it. I don't care. All I want to do is in the moment. I want to make the best music I can make. I want to, with the podcast, have these conversations with other artists. I want to push the culture forward. All I want to do is make people understand why I like the music I like and why I make the music I make, and have that connection. The connection you feel when you're standing on stage playing to a bunch of people, and it's a special moment. It doesn't happen most shows, but when it does, I mean, it's a drug. I'm completely addicted to it. Wow. That's what I'm trying to get back to every time. Just that moment when you connect with everybody out there. You play the right song at the right time, and everybody kind of just like leaves their body for a minute. That for me, it's the moment. Like, I don't really care about the legacy. I care about what we're doing right now.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you so much. That was awesome.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye, guys.